Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming to you from the Mozaic Works studios, and what I have for you today is a commentary to an InfoQ article called How to Have More Effective Conversations with Business Stakeholders About Software Architecture. But before we move into the main topic, let me just say right from the beginning, we love comments. Please leave us comments. They can be anything, suggestions for things that we should comment on, or for katas, or practical coding exercise or architecture that you are interested in. They could be questions, they can be suggestions. We will answer them, we'll take them into account for our next videos. And now it's time to move on to our main topic. So this article was published on 27 February 2023, so pretty recently. It's written by Kurt Bittner, VP of Enterprise Solution at Scrum.org, and Pierre Pureur, Experienced Software Architects, reviewed by Thomas Batts, Laureate Application Architect at Blackboard. I think we have already seen some articles. Definitely, we've seen some articles reviewed by Thomas Batts, but I think we've also seen some articles by Kurt Bittner. And the name of the article and why it made me very interested is How to Have More Effective Conversations with Business Stakeholders About Software Architecture. And the reason why I find this topic interesting is because I'm doing a lot of trainings with architects and with developers who want to become architects or who are interested in software architecture. And one of the things that is unexpected to them is how much you need to communicate and how much you need to have conversations and negotiate with all different types of people, with business people, C-level types, with IT ops, with DevOps, with security specialists, with developers, with testers, with infrastructure, and so on. So there are a lot of conversations that you need to have once you get responsibility related to software architecture, whether you are officially a software architect or whether your team is doing some kind of things that are more strategic in nature and more related to software architecture. And so this is a very interesting article, and let's look through it. Key takeaways. I'm just gonna make this bigger. Trust and transparency provide the foundation for effective conversations. We won't be successful until you can have open and meaningful conversation with business stakeholders. Yes, and you need to speak in their language. This is very important. Frame scope discussion in terms of business outcomes, not features. Yes. And I think this is one of the hardest things to do for all technical people, from developers, testers, but also for architects. Every conversation with a business stakeholder will probably turn into a conversation about money. And what they are most concerned about is not absolute cost, but cost effectiveness. Yeah, and you need to be prepared with a clear case. Show the options and show why the option that you picked makes the most sense. Stay away from technical details, but don't be afraid to speak in terms that they might not understand, because the goal of this is for them to be convinced that you know what you are doing. Is not necessarily to fully understand your decisions. Cost thresholds can help team make better architectural decisions. Okay, that's an interesting point. I'm curious to see what they are expanding related to this. An application is like an iceberg. Business stakeholders only see features above the water, so most of the architectural decisions are invisible and underwater. That is correct. Although maybe today with the cloud, it's easier to make a case for reducing infrastructure costs, for example, while maintaining performance or stuff like this. I think one of the things that they are interested in is, and at least from my experience, is stability and resilience. When applications go down, of course, you get a lot of phone calls. But when if the application stays up and things work as expected, even if you have like bugs or things like this, but if the application is stable, stays up and so on, most of the times it's better. So this is something that they understand. They also understand infrastructure costs nowadays. I think it's much more easy to explain this. Discuss architectural decisions in terms of customer experience to help stakeholders understand the trade-offs between different alternatives. Of course, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Always focus on the experience. Quality attributes can help to frame this discussion by helping you to talk about the quality of the customer experience in concrete and measurable ways. I think that one additional issue here is that some of the architectural decisions are linked to risks and threats. And while I think threats have become more clear since they are always in the news and people start to understand them, like security threats, and I see a lot of interest. I started doing a secure coding learning program, and we already have a lot of interested people to take this. It basically explains security and how to think about security in terms that developers understand. So not necessarily in the terms of the security professionals, and understand the mindset and all that. But I think at C-level and stakeholders, they know a bit more about this than they used to know like 15 years ago. What is difficulties with risks, other types of risks? Those are not sexy. So if I can say that, it's not something that you want to think about, right? Threats also you don't want to think about, but since every day you get new reports for a company that was hacked and some data was stolen and stuff like that, well, this has gotten more public. But other types of risks are not as clear, well, maybe except for money risks. So if you can turn this into money, it's easier to understand. But I think indeed quality attributes are best at explaining trade-offs. Trade-offs, some of the architectural trade-offs are difficult to understand, and in architecture you always have trade-offs. Everything is a trade-off. If you think you have a decision that doesn't have a trade-off, you haven't found a trade-off yet. So this is very, very important. Trade-offs are a big part of architecture. You need to understand them. You need to be able to present them simply enough for people who are not technical to get them. And that's helped with quality attributes. And I like this quote: almost every problem in software development is fundamentally a communication problem. Pretty much. I guess there are a few that aren't, but pretty much, yeah. Development teams have a challenge when they need business support for technical decisions. Business people don't really care about technology. They might care about what you can do for them or for their customers if you can explain it succinctly and quickly. As technology has penetrated nearly every aspect of life, at least you can rely on a basic user level knowledge, but even this can cause some discussion challenges because what users see are systems that largely work, not the underlying mess that often just barely works. This is, I think, very true in the sense that there's always something messy. Systems, it's incredible how software systems work, actually. Some people remember to run manual scripts from time to time and fix some weird problems and stuff like that. Once a system grows complex enough, it's very hard to understand what's going on there anymore. And a lot of the things that you are doing are out of folklore, basically. It's what happened before you, and somebody knows that this will work, so you try and it works. And but this is not very transparent to people, and I think I've touched on this when I discussed the tacit knowledge problem at Twitter. So it's quite interesting. Most of the time this isn't a problem, with a few big exceptions when you need a decision that needs business support in terms of funding, product direction, or business policies and processes. Technology often comes with side effects that can dramatically improve products but require changes to the way the business runs or the way it interacts with customers, which business stakeholders need to understand and embrace. With these benefits also come significant costs. If you can't explain them in ways these business stakeholders will understand, you won't be able to build the support you need for the change. Yeah, of course. So the first point is trust and transparency foster effective communication. And they talk about the fact that there is this idea that the business is a customer of IT. And that's not true. I've actually been with a lot of organizations as a coach where they had this mentality of, the business is doing that, the business is asking us that, they don't understand, and so on. You need to bring them in. You need to have conversations. And as they say, forced separation between business and development organization creates the illusion that win-lose is possible. In reality, if it's not win-win, it's lose-lose. So you don't want to be necessarily subordinate to the business. You want to collaborate as much as possible. Now, of course, some decisions will be executive decisions, and that's it. Whether you like it or not, they will happen, but you have a lot of things that you can explain to business people. This later dysfunction often arises out of discussions and of cost and time for projects. The scenario usually plays out like this. The business say they need some solution to a problem they don't fully understand, and they provide a partial list of features that may or may not really be needed. IT takes the bait, responds with a good faith but completely imaginary estimate of cost and time based on their interpretation of what the solution to the presumed problem is, incorporating the partial list of potentially irrelevant features. Yeah. I've seen that again and again. So this is a big problem. When you have this idea, the business comes and say, this is what we need. They don't come with a problem that is well defined. The IT doesn't, or developers don't help them get to a problem that is well defined. They come with their own ideas and requirements and so on, and you just They just ask you, okay, estimate, implement. And then if your estimate is wrong, they'll say, why is that wrong? And of course, first of all, you will negotiate the estimates and so on. I found that this is much easier in an agile environment. If you are doing an actual agile, an organization that improves agility, let's say, what you have is you have teams that are working on specific products. So you need to define your products. You have teams working on those products. You have a number of teams. And particularly if the teams are actually cross-functional, so they can implement everything in that product from top to bottom without dependencies from other teams, then what you have is a very good place, and you don't actually need estimates anymore. You don't actually need budgets anymore that much. And I know this may sound weird, but there is this idea called beyond budgeting, where you don't budget like every 6 months or every year. You just figure out what the priorities are of the business, focus on those priorities, and that's it. So things can get much easier once you get in at the point where developers can work independently, can deliver effectively, but also when they collaborate with the business and you see that line, that product line, as kind of its own mini business where there's a lot of collaboration between the product manager or product owner and the teams. This helps a lot. But let's see what they are saying. The problem is that most requirements are not valuable, but you don't know which ones are valuable. Yeah, and you need to do some kind of product discovery or testing on the market to sort them out. A better starting point and the way to build trust and encourage transparency is to first agree that there are no sides in collaboration. The business and the IT needs to work together to develop the best solution they can. Yeah, exactly. This helps them to understand what they want to need to achieve and what benefits they might obtain. Yeah. Doing this has several benefits. It leads to healthy discussion about desired outcomes and what success looks like. Yeah. So you define your goals very clearly, you define your problem and the boundaries of the problem very clearly, and it's much easier. It establishes through financial modeling an upper threshold on what they can spend and still maintain their profitability goals. Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. Typically, the way you should think about funding software is we need it or we don't need it. So we have a specific problem. Do we actually need a solution for this problem? And if the answer is yes, then you fund it. It's as easy as that. Now, of course, there is an upper threshold, and that's a very good idea. Figure out what is the point after which the solution is more costly than not solving the problem. Basically, this is what basically it's about. Now, of course, it gets more complicated when you try to launch products on markets that you don't know. But in that case, what you should do is to optimize learning first. So you realize that you don't know the market. Let's build product market fit first. Let's find a problem that actually fits, is understood by our market, and the solution makes sense to them and they want to buy the solution. And you do this through product discovery practices. And after that, you can actually go and think about funding in the same way. Until then, what you are doing is basically financing a set of bets. you are betting on different things, and if you are betting on many small things, chances are that one of them or a few of them will be successful. And this is basically hedging your risks. Yeah, okay, it gives them practice working together that can lead to better trust and transparency. Cool. So more talks about estimation. I think we done this. You can't achieve trust and transparency until you can have credible discussions about cost. You have to involve business stakeholders in decision about cost by having transparent discussions about benefits and costs framed in terms of outcomes. Yeah, so basically what you need to do is a business case that says, how much are we willing to invest to get this value out? And it is what it is. Typically, what's interesting is, depending on the product, you may find out very quickly what the value is. So for example, if you are trying to automate something from your organization, it means that you have a problem and you're trying to automate around that problem. So you know how much you're spending on, maybe you have some manual work done to solve that problem right now, and you automate. If you automate that part of the process, you can actually see how much per day, per week, per month you will be saving. Now you probably won't be saving 100%, you'll still need some maintenance because there's some costs. And then there's also the infrastructure cost, and there's the initial cost of implementing the software and so on. But, and then there's some maintenance cost, most likely. So it's easier to compare these two. And you can kind of deduce what is the investment you want to make, rather than doing the other way around and thinking about how much this will take, how much this will cost to implement, and so on. It's easier to estimate things like infrastructure costs and so on than it is to estimate how long it will take to solve this, and how many developers and how much it will cost. Right? I wish more organization would think like this. All right. Frame scope discussions in terms of business outcomes. One big barrier to effective conversations about technical decisions that need business input is that development teams and business stakeholders speak different languages. Typically, to be more precise, when techies talk about technology, business people tune out. Let me say it again. When techies talk about technology, business people tune out. Yeah. What you need to do is frame discussions in terms of how technical choices will affect business outcomes, something they care about. Yeah, and they are going and discussing about technical debt as an example. That's a good example. Security, right? Good example. I like it. That's a very good thing. So generally, let me see, what examples do I give here? So when you talk about trade-offs, you have trade-offs like, should we have more security or more performance? You might also have trade-offs of, should we have more security. It's easy to explain. If you want more security, you need to add more checks, you need to add more encryption, you need to add all these things, take more time, and particularly, so you can link it to performance. If you are doing this in a open cloud environment like AWS or Google Cloud, that also probably costs you money because there's more time spent on executing things. So and you can frame things like this. You can talk about these topics, your technical choices and how they affect business outcomes. And typically, you should probably start. This is something that we teach in a few of our learning programs, something called impact mapping, where you start from goals before you try to define the requirements. And your goal, it can be of a few different types. You can have goals that are related to increasing money, reducing costs, and protecting money, which means avoiding regulatory fines, and accelerating development, which basically relates to technical debt, reducing technical debt. So these are 4 big categories of goals, and you can relate many of the architectural decisions to some of them. If we do it like this, then development will take longer, but we'll have a more performant, you'll have a higher performance, which means our users will be happier, or will have lower infrastructure costs, things like that. So yeah. In an early article, we talked about using quality attribute requirements to capture important capabilities that the system must be able to achieve. QARs are expression of business outcomes that the system must enable. We prefer a stimulus response and measurement format. Using a tight performance example, a performance-related QAR would be expressed as: when a letter of credit specialist processes a payment request following acceptance of documents from an exporter, the system will respond by sending the payment to the exporter's bank and debiting the importer's account. The following will be measured: the end-to-end payment transaction time does not exceed 5 seconds. This is a quite good. I kind of like this format. I like this format because it looks like a given when then kind of format, to be honest, but it also adds performance criteria or other types of criteria, right? That's a good way of framing the conversation, I think. I will have to try it some more, and particularly with some of the people who are having this issue, and let's see, maybe I think we can include this into the way we talk about architecture. It's a good idea. It's also a good idea probably to have this defined as part of a conversation where business is present, or at least some stakeholders. Yeah. Now, the challenge with that is, of course, that they will say, yeah, we want it to be in 1 millisecond. And you say, oh, yeah, okay, but then the costs will go sky high. So you have to be prepared for some negotiation. Every conversation with a business stakeholder turns into a conversation about money. Come prepared. This is, I think, their 3rd point. You always need to think about money. And that's interesting. Talking about money makes IT uncomfortable, and business stakeholders only want to talk about money. I think the reason it makes us uncomfortable is because they are asking us about things that we don't know and we can't predict. But on the other hand, what I think we are missing is that there are things that we can predict. So for example, if you come to me and say, I want to implement a new product that's, let's say, an e-commerce type of product that sells books. And then we'll start discussing and say, okay, so how many users do you expect? And if you don't know how many users you expect to buy, then we can make an approximation and an estimation based on the size of your bookshop and the industry averages and stuff like that. So you can do some kind of estimate there, which is it's still a guess, but it's an informed guess. It's much more informed than estimating the time it will take for us to implement that. And then based on that, we can go and compute, and we know the number of books, and we know, things like that. So we can estimate how many records we need in a database or the size of the database. We can probably estimate the number of transactions that you need. And based on that, we can go on and, especially again for a cloud environment, and compute the costs. And what will be kind of minimum cost, maximum cost, kind of the average. Maybe your buyers are, or let's say the calls to your website will follow some cycle, like during the day people will order and not during the night and stuff like that. So then we can talk about sizing up and down things. So when it comes to this, we can actually do a pretty good estimate of the end costs, operational costs. What it's hard to estimate is the cost for developing the whole thing. But once we get at the end, we'll probably be pretty close. We'll be much closer with the estimations for the infrastructure than with the estimations for the time for development. And what stakeholders really care about cost effectiveness. Cost effectiveness is an oft overlooked but critical quality attribute that helps teams make better architectural decisions. Most companies, particularly financial companies, are concerned about the cost of their IT function, especially if they happen to operate in the retail sector. Yet few teams explicitly design for cost effectiveness. As a result, they could create an application that is too expensive to run and maintain. See, so that's very interesting. We can actually measure these things. We can actually talk about them. We can estimate them. It's okay. It's a bit difficult, but it's not the nicest process if you like to build stuff. But it's something that's very fine. It's possible, and you will get better results out of this. Okay, and then cost thresholds can help team make better decisions. Here's one way to approach the problem, especially in early discussions about opportunities, outcomes, and cost. Consider a company that has identified an opportunity they will think will result in an additional $100 million if they can satisfy $100 million if they can satisfy a particularly unmet customer outcome. If the company expects that it will obtain at least a 20% profit margin, it means that the total of their expenses in delivering the outcome cannot exceed $80 million. We are ignoring the time value of money for the sake of illustration. Of course, so you need to take out some more here. I would say 10 to 20%, but and you end up with a number that's probably closer to reality, but it's a good guess, right? Let's assume that at least initially it does not know whether it can deliver the outcome or how much it will cost. It simply knows how much customers might be willing to pay for it and the maximum amount the organization would be willing to pay to achieve it. We call this amount the cost threshold. Yeah, so that's actually a very good approach, and I think this is the key to making software development work. The key is to focus on those things that you can actually measure, predict, and so on, and treat everything else as it is, like an investment, a bet. right? When you are making an investment, it's possible that you will get a good return of investment. It's possible that you will lose. It's possible that you will get a very good return of investment. Or it's possible that you'll just break even. That's how life is. And basically what we are doing when we are implementing a new product, or when we are adding new features to a product, is we are making an investment. And this investment has to be controlled by the business people with the support of software developers. Because we need to explain to them the things about technology that they might not know, but that affect their thinking and their decision making related to the investment. So looking at the problem from the other side is actually a very good approach. I like it. A cost threshold expresses from a business perspective that it's undesirable for us to pursue these business outcomes if it costs us more than the cost threshold. Yeah, and then it's easy to understand that. And basically you can take out some of the things. Once you have this threshold, so they were talking about 80 million. Let's say we cut 20% out of it, just to be sure. And so we end up with, I don't know, 60 something millions. After that, we look at things like infrastructure cost and other things that we know. We can remove those as well. Let's say they are, I don't know, 20 million. And then we can ask ourselves, okay, can we make this for 40 million or whatever is remaining? Can we develop it, or for 30 millions? And if we cannot, then or if we don't yet know, we can at least do something else, which is, what are the most important features? And let's start the analysis again and look at what is the smallest problem that we could solve to prove that this works. And then you go into a hedge your bet scenarios where you can actually test different bets, see which one works, pick the one that is most likely, invest in that, and see what the return is. And that's basically the model. Okay, architecting is about managing trade-offs. Talking about trade-offs in meaningful ways can be challenging. Yeah, so I'm curious what they are talking about here. Discussing scalability decisions, an example. Okay. So this is a figure that they have made that illustrates how scalability concerns affect costs as well as several other QARs. Scalability impacts cost, performance, availability, and usability impacts cost. Scalability also impacts availability, and scalability and performance impact each other. Scalability is technically complex, and the complexity is hard to communicate to business stakeholders. Business stakeholders may believe that scalability and performance issues can be solved by throwing money at the problem, buying more capacity, put the system in the cloud. They may think that they can safely ignore scalability concerns because the cloud provider will handle them. In truth, I have seen and I have worked with architects who are convinced about that as well. So it's not only business people. In fact, a poorly designed system that does not scale well in a proprietary environment is not likely to scale well in a commercial cloud without significant design changes or a significant cost. Right. But they still don't give an example on how to discuss. Simulating the effect of large workloads will provide you with insights into its scalability and performance, as well as information that will help inform better conversations about scaling needs. Yes, this is something I keep telling architects to do. What you need to have is the curve response time versus number of requests per minute or second or whatever. So start with a small number of requests, then add more and more and more, and see how the curve looks like. If you can show this graph, first of all, it's an engineering approach. You can look at this graph and make some educated guesses. I mean, you never know what will happen after a certain point, but it's likely that the curve will be continuous. And if the tendency is to go up, it will probably go up. If the tendency is to stay constant, it will probably stay constant up to a point. So, and there are no, it would be nice to have some kind of simulators that would be able to show this, but in the end, I think the only way to do this is to actually run these performance, well, yeah, it's kind of performance tests or load tests, and measure the time. And once you have this graph, you can also estimate the costs, the infrastructure costs for scalability. And you can take this graph to anyone, to IT ops, to DevOps, to security, to business analysts, to C-level, and so on, and show them, look, up to this, and of course explain what it means. So, because they might not know how many requests you have per minute or how much was the average now. So you need to show what the average is now, what is the what you aim for, was the maximum you had in the past, things like that, the maximum expected. But it's much, much easier to have a conversation once you have this data. Bring the data with you and the conversation will go smoother. All right. Conclusion, ultimately business stakeholders seem only to care about money, but that's not completely true. They care about profit, and by making money discussions only about costs, development teams constrain their ability to have healthy conversations about trade-offs that can help them develop better solutions. Yes, so much yes. So I've seen in a lot of organizations that the IT, the development organization, part of a larger structure, has cornered itself into being a cost center. And it's such a bad place to be. You are not a cost center. You can be part of the business. And businesses, I think, start more and more to understand that software is an asset, although code is a liability, but software, the automation and all that, that's an asset. And the data is an asset and so on. So you are important, but only if you participate in the discussion related to profits and not related to cost. So important. Maybe I've seen this more because the companies I've worked with in Romania, I'm working with a lot of companies in EU as well, but in Romania, typically when large organizations have opened here offices, they treat them like a cost center. So it's basically, get these projects, estimate, implement them, let us know, stuff like that. And they are in very tough spots because of this. Well, but maybe not in very tough spots, because it's still a good place to be. They are paid well and all that. But it's not as pleasant as it could be once you get to actually participate in these conversations. So absolutely. Talk more about profit, about investments, about bets. This is the language, and show your data. Show that you've done your homework. Once you start doing that, organization stakeholders will start taking you more seriously and involve you in these conversations. And if you get there, it will be much better for you because you can actually remove a lot of the unpleasantness of development, which is, giving information that is not correct, guessing and stuff like that. And instead, focus on what you can do and what you know how to do. That's really good. Once started down a more effective path, development team should continually focus on staying within the cost threshold and even lowering it by raising issues early when they think they might approach or exceed it. Resulting discussions with business stakeholders about trade-offs will help everyone make better trade-off decisions. Right. I love this article. Once again, Kurt Bittner and Pierre Pureur. Very interesting article. Lots of good points. Some valuable practical things. I particularly liked this format for QARs, which apparently I cannot find it right now. Yeah, this one. The stimulus, response, and measurement format. And I'm curious whether you could include it in a BDD analysis, behavior-driven development analysis. But that's a question for people who have done behavior-driven development or are teaching it more. I'm curious what they think, people who are more experienced than I am, and I will ask a few people and see what they think. All right, this has been it for me. Please leave us comments, questions, suggestions, ideas, links to articles, stuff like that. Coding katas. What do you think about this topic? Does this help you get a better view on how to communicate with your business stakeholders? What other problems are you facing? Let us know. Thank you kindly for a view, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.